There are moments in a life when the air around you seems to thicken, as if the world itself is pausing to listen. A faint gravitational pull gathers behind ordinary events, beckoning you toward a threshold you did not know you stood upon. You may mistake it for tension or fatigue, or the strange silence that follows a heated argument. But beneath it, the unconscious is stirring. Jung called this synchronicity, the meaningful coincidence that cracks the surface of the persona, revealing that the life you believed yourself to be living is only a thin mask stretched over something far vaster. It begins, usually, with a confrontation that feels almost fated, the moment your voice trembles because someone else has tried to drown it out. Most people think arguments are about facts or reasons. They are not. They are ceremonies of power, ancient as the first fires around which tribes gathered. When a person raises their voice to you, something in your deep memory, the collective ancestral layer, remembers the primal threat of being swallowed by another's will. Before you even speak, your body knows, your throat tightens, your chest contracts. And still, on some days, you find the strength to answer, not with more noise, but with clarity. You say, "I don't need to raise my voice to be right." And in that moment, you witness something unusual. The other person falls silent, not because you overpowered them, but because you stepped out of the primitive battlefield entirely. This is the first crack in the persona, the carefully crafted social mask you wear to be accepted, to survive, to belong. The persona is useful. It helps you navigate the world with a coherent face, but it becomes dangerous when you mistake it for identity. When you utter a sentence that reveals your inner authority, you feel the persona loosen. Something deeper begins to speak through you, something older, quieter, fiercely calm. The unconscious, hearing its own resonance, steps forward. The Stoics understood this calm not as weakness, but as a form of inner kingship. Jung understood it as the ego's first recognition of the self, the organizing, sovereign center of the psyche. And you feel it as a strange, electric composure. While the other person burns with agitation, you remain anchored, almost surprised at your own firmness. Their shouting exposes them, your stillness reveals you. But illumination never comes without shadow. On another day, when someone aims sarcasm at you like a blade, you feel the old reflexive wounds tremble awake. Sarcasm strikes deeper than shouting because it invites your shadow, your buried insecurities, to take shape. And yet, instead of defending yourself or accepting the invitation to self-doubt, you hear yourself say, "The way you speak says much more about you than about me." It is not an attack, it is a mirror the unconscious has held in your hand. In Jungian terms, this is the beginning of shadow differentiation. The moment you stop believing that every arrow aimed in your direction has your name carved into it, you return the projection to its rightful owner. You allow the other person's bitterness to reveal not your inadequacy, but their inner landscape. And in doing so, you feel something shift. The boundary between what you must carry and what was never yours begins to sharpen. These moments are not rhetorical tricks. They are initiations. Each one pulls you one step further from unconscious living into the dawning awareness that your voice, calm, deliberate, anchored, carries the authority of an inner lineage you are only beginning to remember. There comes a point in every psychological journey when the outer world begins to lose its overpowering shine, and the inner world starts to whisper with undeniable intensity. It often happens at the moment when you realize that some conversations are not conversations at all, but elaborate snares woven from someone else's unintegrated shadow. You feel it in your body first, a tightening in the solar plexus, a fluttering in the chest, the instinctive sense that you are being pulled into a labyrinth whose exit keeps shifting. Every attempt to speak becomes tangled. Every clarification is met with distortion, and something primal inside you recoils, whispering a truth you have ignored for too long. Not every exchange deserves your life force. It is here, in this liminal zone between the persona's compliance and the self's authority, that you utter a sentence that feels less like something you chose and more like something that rose up through you. Let's talk when we can do it respectfully. With those words, you step out of the labyrinth entirely. The manipulator, the narcissist, the chaos maker, they depend on your participation. Your withdrawal is not avoidance. It is initiation into sovereignty. From a Jungian perspective, this is the ego learning the first law of psychological adulthood. You cannot control another's behavior, but you are entirely responsible for the boundaries you uphold. Epictetus expressed the same principle, But Jung would remind us that the boundary is not merely interpersonal, it is intrapsychic. It marks the moment you stop allowing the unconscious of another person to colonize your psyche. When you stand up, or hang up, or walk away without anger but with clarity, you are not simply ending a conversation, you are crossing a threshold. That withdrawal is a symbolic descent, the beginning of the journey into the underworld of your own unconscious. Down there, beneath the noise of arguments and the echoes of old wounds, waits a deeper truth. You have been negotiating with shadows your entire life. This descent is not dramatic at first. It begins quietly. You sit alone after the argument, hands still trembling slightly, and you notice a faint burning in your chest. Anger, yes, but also something more essential, a sense of dignity reclaiming itself. Jung wrote that individuation often begins in moments of psychic tension when the ego can no longer pretend it is whole. Conflict becomes the fissure through which new consciousness enters. But before the self can emerge, you must face the parts of yourself you have abandoned to keep the peace. This is where the fourth response arises, soft yet irrevocably firm. I don't want to continue this conversation. Spoken without malice, it carries the weight of generations of women who were taught to explain, justify, soften, endure. When you speak it, the sentence feels almost foreign, as if borrowed from another woman, an ancestor perhaps, who stands behind you in the collective unconscious, placing her hand on your shoulder. Choosing not to continue is an act of self-preservation, but more profoundly, it is an act of psychological differentiation. You are no longer entangled in the ancient feminine wound, the wound of compulsory accommodation. Instead, you allow the conversation to die, and in its silence, you feel something astonishing. You have not collapsed. You have not lost anything except what was draining you. In fact, you have gained a piece of your own psychic territory. This is the beginning of the underworld descent, when you discover that solitude is not emptiness but a sacred chamber. The ego trembles, but the deeper self stirs. And you sense, faintly but unmistakably, that every step away from chaos is a step toward the core of your own power. In the quiet that follows withdrawal, something unexpected happens. Without the noise of conflict to occupy your attention, the psyche begins to reveal its deeper architecture. You may think you are simply resting, recovering from the tension of an unproductive exchange. But what you are truly entering is the symbolic night of the soul, the underworld Jung spoke of, the place where the unlived life waits like a forgotten heirloom. Down here, your shadow steps forward, not as a monster, but as a mirror. Shadow is often misunderstood as darkness or malice. Jung described it more accurately as everything the ego has disowned in order to remain acceptable. Anger that was forbidden, ambition discouraged, intuition dismissed, boundaries mocked, vulnerability exploited. As you sit in silence, recovering from the strain of interacting with someone who thrives on chaos, you begin to recognize how often you have silenced yourself to avoid being seen as difficult, emotional, or too much. The world told you that equanimity meant suppression. Yet in this depth, you begin to see that true calm is not the absence of fire, but the mastery of it. It is here that another sentence rises gently into consciousness, one that feels both tender and immovable. That is your opinion, and I respect it, but I don't share it. This phrase may seem polite on the surface, but psychologically it is revolutionary. It marks the emergence of differentiation, the ability to maintain your center even in the gravitational pull of someone else's certainty. For women, especially, this is an eruption of long-buried agency. The collective unconscious hums behind it, the voices of countless generations who were told they must yield in order to be loved. In Jungian thought, such moments signal the reorganization of the inner masculine, the animus. The animus, at its distorted stage, manifests as the internalized critical voice, authoritarian, dogmatic, blaming. But when it evolves, when it is purified through the fires of conflict and introspection, it becomes a guardian of truth. You feel its maturation as a grounded inner presence that grants you permission to think your own thoughts without apology. It is the inner masculine serving the self, not dominating the ego. Once you experience this inner shift, the outer world changes texture. The opinions of others lose their hypnotic power. You no longer sway like a reed at the slightest gust of disapproval. A strange stillness emerges, not resignation, but self-possession. Jung wrote that the self often appears first as a feeling of inner firmness, a center of gravity that anchors the psyche. You feel this now, subtle yet unmistakable, as if a deeper intelligence has stepped into the room. But as with all descents, ancestral voices begin to stir. Memories surface, your mother's strained smile while swallowing words she longed to say, your grandmother's quiet endurance, the generations of women whose boundaries were eroded by duty, fear, or the need for approval. This is not personal memory. It is transgenerational material, the psychic inheritance carried unconsciously until one woman chooses to examine it. In Jungian terms, these are fragments of the collective unconscious rising to meet you, seeking integration through your awareness. You begin to see that every boundary you set is not only an act of self-care, but a rupture in an ancient lineage of silence. The sentence you speak, calm, respectful, unwavering, becomes a ritual of repair. You are no longer obeying the inherited script. You are rewriting it. And in this recognition, you feel the faint but growing pulse of transformation. The journey is no longer merely about surviving conflict. It is about becoming the woman your unconscious has been shaping you toward all along. As you move deeper into this psychological underworld, you begin to notice a subtle shift in the atmosphere of your inner life. The descent no longer feels like a fall, but like a pilgrimage. What once seemed like fragmentation begins to reveal itself as rearrangement. You feel as though you are walking through a vast subterranean library, arched ceilings, endless corridors, shelves lined with the unlived stories of your own lineage. Every step you take echoes with memories that do not belong solely to you. These are the ancestral imprints Jung called the collective unconscious, patterns older than your name and deeper than your biography. Here, the father complex emerges, not as a single man, but as an archetype. The internalized masculine that once demanded compliance, validation, and achievement now takes shape in your psyche, asking to be understood. You see the echoes, the way you sought approval from loud voices, the way you felt diminished in the presence of aggression, the way you mistook dominance for authority. These were not personal failures. They were the inherited distortions of a culture that taught women to measure their worth against the standards of men, to contort themselves into shapes pleasing to the patriarchal imagination. And yet, in the underworld, everything returns to its original form. Here you realize something profound. The true masculine is not the voice that shouts at you, but the one within you that stands with calm, unwavering integrity. The sentence you once whispered, "I don't need to raise my voice to be right," now reveals itself as the nascent voice of your inner masculine rising in service of your individuation. This is what Jung meant by the reconciliation of the opposites. The animus, purified of its collective distortions, becomes the architect of your inner authority. It is in this crucible that Eros awakens, not sexual desire, but the vital life force that moves through every creative act, every expression of truth, every boundary that guards your psychic integrity. Eros does not shout. It whispers with a clarity that cannot be mistaken. It is the voice that guides you when you say, "I don't want to continue this conversation," not out of exhaustion, but out of reverence for your own soul. It is the same voice that steadies your hand when you choose silence over escalation, restraint over chaos, self-respect over self-abandonment. When Eros stirs, it draws you toward the self, the organizing center of the psyche, the axis around which all true transformation occurs. At first, you feel it as a warmth in the chest, a sense that you are no longer spinning in the orbit of other people's moods or expectations. Soon, it becomes something stronger, a gravitational pull inward toward a still point that feels both deeply personal and utterly universal. The self is not a goal, but a presence, ancient and intimate, that has been guiding you long before you had language for it. Emerging from your descent, you carry a new kind of silence. Not the silence of suppression, but the silence of sovereignty. It is a silence that unsettles those who once relied on your compliance, a silence that reveals the emptiness of their aggression. But it is also a silence that steadies you, that allows you to hear the soft, unmistakable pulse of your own becoming. In this silence, you begin to understand you were never meant to overpower others, you were meant to outgrow the need to. This is the altitude of consciousness, the rare air of those who have descended into themselves and returned with vision. As you rise from the underworld, the world above does not appear as it once did. Colors seem sharper, movements slower, and conversations more revealing, not because they have changed, but because you have. Individuation, Jung wrote, is not an ascent into perfection, but a return to the world with new eyes, eyes capable of perceiving the symbolic dimension of ordinary life. Now, when someone speaks to you with aggression or contempt, you no longer feel the instinct to shrink or retaliate. Instead, you observe. You notice the tremor of insecurity behind their volume, the childlike hunger behind their attempts to dominate. You recognize that much of what wounded you was never truly personal. It was shadow, unprocessed, unowned, projected outward in desperation. But what has changed most is not how you see others, it is how you see yourself. The boundaries you once whispered now emanate from you as naturally as breath. You feel the calmness of someone who has discovered her own center of gravity. When you say, "The way you speak says more about you than about me," the sentence no longer feels like a defense. It feels like truth spoken from an inner mountain. When you say, "Let's talk when we can do it respectfully," it is not a request but a statement of the laws that govern your inner kingdom. When you say, "I don't want to continue this conversation," you feel no guilt, only relief. The relief of a woman who finally recognizes that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the refusal to abandon herself within it. This is the moment the self steps fully forward, not as an idea, but as a living presence. You sense it in your spine, in the quiet of your mind, in the way your breath settles into your body. The self is the axis around which opposites reconcile, the point at which the wounded child and the emerging sovereign finally meet. It is the place where your shadow is no longer a threat, but an ally, where your inner masculine stands not as a critic, but as a guardian, where eros flows freely through your choices, animating your life with vitality and clarity. And from this center, you begin to understand the deeper purpose of your transformation. It is not merely for your own liberation, though that would have been reason enough. It is also for the collective, for every woman who has swallowed her truth to preserve harmony, for every daughter who inherited the silence of her mother, for every voice that was trained to tremble before it could speak. Individuation is never private. The moment one psyche heals, the pattern in the collective unconscious shifts. You become, without effort, a reference point for others. Your boundaries clarify theirs. Your calmness unsettles their chaos. Your sovereignty awakens their longing for their own. And yet, inside this growing clarity, there is also a new kind of loneliness, not the loneliness of lack, but the loneliness of altitude. Few people breathe comfortably at this height, but you do. And the air here, though thin, is honest. It carries the scent of truth, the unmistakable fragrance of a life aligned with the self. Eventually, you return home, not to the house you live in, but to the innermost chamber of your own being. You understand now that the silence you sought to create in others was never the goal. The true silence, the transformative silence, is the one that settles inside you when the ego finally bows to the self. In that silence, you feel the truth that has waited for you through every argument, every wound, every word you never said. The soul becomes powerful the moment it refuses to betray itself. If this journey resonated with you, consider liking, sharing, commenting, or subscribing, so we can continue exploring the depths of Jungian psychology, feminine consciousness, and the inner paths that lead us home to ourselves.